this is Beth from Wellness 360. I am so sorry. We are here with Jay Verna via telephone because our Facebook Live account is not working. I am so sorry. We are running super behind. Hopefully you all will forgive me and we'll be able to continue this talk with me being loud and you can see me, and with Jay online. So, yes, I can hear you, Jay. Say hello.
Hello.
All right, so this is Jay Verna. Jay Verna is from the Webster Recreational Center. He is the fitness specialist. So Jay and I have worked together a lot on projects, and I do a lot for the Webster Rec Center. He is super knowledgeable and a super awesome guy. So, Jay, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at the Webster Rec Center?
Yeah, I am, as you said, the fitness specialist. So basically that means I run all the fitness programs, manage the fitness center and staff, teach classes, coach, create programs, and work with all the wonderful people such as yourself. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's basically what I do.
That is awesome. I know I absolutely love the Webster Rec Center. I call them my yogis, my senior yoga class. I think they're absolutely amazing. So the reason I've asked Jay here to be here today, and I'm really sorry we cannot figure out why the Facebook account is not working today. But the reason I asked him to be here is because we've had some amazing conversations on wellness and health. And we were both reading some awesome books on sleep. And because both of us, me from Wellness 360 and Jay being a fitness specialist, we both agree that sleep is one of the number one things that people are missing in their wellness plan. Would you agree with that, Jay?
Oh, yeah, 100%, for sure.
Awesome. So, Jay, I'm going to quiz you a little bit. I have a couple myths that I want busted. So, we've talked about them before, so I'm not putting you on the spot. But, so myth number 1, does your brain shut off while you're sleeping?
Oh, no, not at all. That's actually, the science behind that is pretty deep, and I'm not going to pretend to necessarily understand it fully. But essentially, you're still awake, but the way the brain works when it's at sleep, it basically filters out all sensory input from our eyes, nose, ears, those type of things. So all those things are working. We're just not able to access those when we're asleep.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. In dreaming and all of the things that we do while we're sleeping, our brain is very, very active. So we're going to get into this a little deeper here coming up very soon. But myth number 2, can you catch up on your sleep?
That's a good question. I was reading a couple of different recent research articles on that, both contradicting each other. Basically, and I was going to kind of recommend it anyway, but the book Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker, he is a sleep scientist at the University of California, Berkeley, and he's done some research into that, and his position on it is that you can't. But again, as I said, I've seen also some research that has shown that, you might be able to do it. But I think the bottom line and the most important thing to remember is that not getting into a sleep debt in the first place. So shoring up your sleep so you're not sleep deprived, so you don't have to do that. So I think it's kind of mixed in terms of that right now.
Yeah, I agree. And to reiterate what we're talking about, everything that I have read and done research on says that although it is the common myth that you really can't. So having those weekend binges where you're out all night or staying up late for those extra movies, you end up with this horrific sleep deficit that's really terrible in your body.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is when you try to make things up on the weekend, it can kind of really mess up your normal circadian rhythms. So it can make it a lot tougher in the long run to improve your sleep quality. So again, the reality is we're all going to live our lives, and we're not going to give up on those late nights out or staying up late to watch a movie. But if we can at least manage on a routine basis, getting adequate sleep 7 days a week and trying to get up and at the same time, I think that'll help out a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. This is one of my things that I remember we talked about in the office, and the example you gave, I'm hoping you give it again. Alcohol is good to help you go to sleep.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I think alcohol can actually make you drowsy, but it's more of a sedative, so you're really technically not sleeping. In other words, you're not getting through those same stages of sleep, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point here.
Yep, we're going to talk about that next. But I remember you saying, so would being hit over the head with a stick, but are you really getting good sleep? It's what you said to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the things, like I said, alcohol is a sedative, and you're basically just knocking yourself out. So, and again, we're probably going to talk about this too, but one of the things that is recommended to help with your sleep or not interfere with your sleep, however you want to look at it, would be to avoid alcohol too late in the evening, which is going to be obviously a big bummer for most of us that I'd like to have a drink, especially on a Friday night. But I think if you don't overdo it, you're probably fine. But if you drink too late into the evening, it's definitely going to have an effect on you. Even if you don't think it is, even if you feel drowsy and you fall asleep, typically what happens is you end up waking up in the wee hours, disrupting your sleep. So again, the reality is, most of us are probably still going to do those things, and there's nothing wrong with it. But just be aware that that's certainly one of the things that could disrupt our sleep.
Especially if you're already having trouble sleeping, maybe playing around and taking it out of your diet to see if it would benefit you.
Yeah, or just drink during the day or in the morning.
So everybody, that was a trick. Jay had no idea I was going to ask those questions. So he's passed. So I'm not going to hang up on him yet. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about the circadian rhythms and the stages of sleep. Jay, I'm going to let you start out with this, and I will kick in whenever I feel I have some things to add.
Sure. Yeah. So circadian rhythms, I think we've all heard about them. It's basically a 24-hour internal clock and cycles between sleep and wakefulness. Basically, based on the day-night cycle, so light and dark kind of trigger it. So basically, the onset of darkness sends a signal to your brain, the hypothalamus, that part of the brain, if anybody's interested, that it's time to feel tired or sleepy. And that actually stimulates the release of melatonin, which most people have heard of. That's a hormone. I know we're going to talk a little bit about sleep and hormones. So that's, in a nutshell, what it is. It kind of controls it based on the day-night cycle over a 24-hour period. And as far as the stages of sleep, there's technically 4 stages. The first 3 are what they call non-REM sleep. The first stage is basically when you go from wakefulness to sleep. It's kind of light sleep. The second stage is a period of light sleep before you enter deeper sleep. Basically, your heartbeat and breathing slow, muscles relax even further. Your body temperature drops, eye movement stops, brain activity slows, those type of things. Stage 3 would be the deep sleep. Again, that non-REM, which I'll explain what REM is in a second. And that's basically the period of deep sleep to feel refreshed in the morning. It occurs in longer periods during the first half of the night. Your heartbeat and breathing slow. Your muscles are relaxed, and it may be difficult to actually awaken you. So if, you come across someone that's asleep and you can't wake them up, they're probably in this stage of sleep. And then there's that REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement. That's what REM stands for. And that first occurs about 90 minutes after falling asleep. And the reason why it's called rapid eye, because your eyes actually move rapidly from side to side. And then basically, breathing becomes faster and irregular, your heart rate and blood pressure increase to near waking levels. Most of your dreaming occurs here, but some can also occur in non-REM sleep. Your arm and leg muscles become temporarily paralyzed. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the stages of sleep are. And I think when you talk about sleep as a whole, how much sleep we need, and I know we'll talk about that. It's about the sleep cycle. So those 4 stages take about 90 minutes, and they repeat throughout the night. So that's kind of the crash course in sleep stages, so to speak.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have down in my notes too. The first stage of sleep is normally the first 5 to 10 minutes, and I wanted to add this in because I deal a lot with meditation and mindfulness. This is the state where you get those that jerking motion, sometimes that feeling of falling or your muscles twitch. There are some studies that show that stress and anxiety can make these worse. Now, there are some other studies that say they're not sure, and some that say that they feel that it does. So just know that either way, it's perfectly normal to have this jerking sensation. We all go through it at some point in our life. And if you start to have them a lot, maybe check into your stress levels, check into what's going on in your life to see if maybe there's any kind of anxiety, fatigue. Maybe you're drinking caffeine a little too late in the day. So just something to think about. I thought that was kind of interesting. And
Absolutely.
then stage 2 is kind of when our body goes into that parasympathetic nervous phase of when our heart rate slows and our breath deepens. And that lasts about 20 minutes. And then, like Jay said, right back into the third, where it's kind of deep sleep. This is where your sleepwalking occurs, and when you have your nightmares. And another thing that I found interesting when I was doing my research for today's topic is this is why those 20-minute cat naps are so great and you feel so good afterwards. But when you sleep longer than 20 to 30 minutes, you end up feeling really drowsy because you end up slipping into this stage 3 non-REM sleep. So that's why it's really important just to get that 20 minutes of sleep and not start tapping into some of those deeper levels. All right. So let's talk a little bit about hormones.
All right.
Yes.
What would you like to know?
So hormones, I mean, come on. Hormones is what helps our circadian rhythm. The body is so awesome how it releases these chemicals throughout the day. They're released on purpose, depending on your environment. So your environment plays a huge role in your sleep patterns.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so let's start out and talk a little bit about, I don't know, you want to start with like adenosine and melatonin and their I have some notes on them if you don't have notes on them.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. With melatonin, and I touched on it earlier, it's basically, again, helps regulate the sleep-wake cycle. So melatonin levels start to rise in the late afternoon, and they continue to kind of go up through the night, and then they start falling down in the early hours of the morning as daylight nears and as your body prepares to wake. You were talking about adenosine, and that's basically a chemical that, along with melatonin, kind of helps. It creates what they call sleep pressure. It builds up throughout the day, and as that builds up, it causes you to become more sleepy. So by the time bedtime comes around, you're primed and ready between the adenosine and the melatonin if everything is working properly. And basically, adenosine is for anybody that's kind of a sciencey person out there, it's basically a byproduct of ATP or adenosine triphosphate, which is the main energy molecule that we use to drive all of our activity in our body, everything from breathing and brain activity to muscle contractions and all the different things that we do. So as we use energy throughout the day, that adenosine builds up as a byproduct, and that causes part of the drowsiness. So I think one of the other things that I want to kind of talk about, because it gets kind of a really bad rap in terms of hormones, is cortisol.
Yes, please do.
In our field, in this wellness space and fitness space, it's constantly being demonized as being bad, but it obviously has a role.
And a very important role.
Absolutely, and there's no question that chronically elevated levels of cortisol contribute to sleep disruptions and other health problems. but basically it's a stimulating and alerting hormone, and what it helps with is regulating blood pressure, balancing blood sugar levels, influencing inflammation, regulating energy levels, contributing to cardiac system function, all those types of things too. So when that whole thing is working right, rising levels of cortisol towards the time when we're going to wake up kind of prepares our body to be awake and start the day, so to speak. So again, when everything is working properly, it's definitely a good thing. That sympathetic neural drive that we talk about all the time is obviously needed for us to be awake and to function normally. It's probably a topic for another talk, talking about, being overly sympathetic in terms of neural drive and how that affects stress and all the myriad of problems that come along with that. So yeah, basically cortisol, melatonin, and adenosine, those are all big factors in, both sleep, getting us to feel drowsy and fall asleep, as well as waking us up.
Yeah, I tell my, because I teach, again, the mindfulness class, we talk a lot about cortisol, and I try not to put too much negativity on cortisol, only because, again, you're not going to get out of bed if you don't have the cortisol flow.
And I think all the negative talk about cortisol is pretty justified if you look at how we live our lives. I mean, constantly plugged in. We're stressed. We've got, constant, feedback coming in at all times. So, of course, those levels are going to be up, and they're going to drive some of the pathological problems that we see, as well as sleep disruptions and those type of things. So, all those things are certainly valid, but given, what we're talking about here, it's obviously critical in this whole wakefulness cycle. I think we also talked a little bit too, we wanted to hit on those hunger hormones and how they can be affected by sleep or lack thereof.
Absolutely. This is a biggie. I asked Jay to talk about this one because I feel like this is so important. Coming from his expertise, I'd like to hear his take on this. So let's talk a little bit about the ghrelin and the leptin hormones.
Yeah, so ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is basically a hormone that stimulates appetite, so that's what makes us hungry, and leptin is just the opposite. It decreases it. So basically, when we are sleep deprived, there is a decrease in leptin. So that basically results in us being hungry. And while leptin levels are decreasing, ghrelin levels are going up. So typically what ends up happening in a situation like that, when we're chronically underslept or sleep deprived, is we tend to have hunger, and we tend to make very poor choices nutritionally in this situation. Typically we don't reach for that piece of fruit or vegetable or something wholesome and healthy. It tends to be those starchy, sugary foods that we reach. So that's kind of the link when you see references to being sleep deprived and weight gain, and obesity and those things. It all, I think, a big part of it is what happens with those two hormones when you are sleep deprived. So, just to kind of put this in perspective, and I say this all the time to people, especially now when we're all kind of cooped up in our homes, most of us anyway. I think it's great to want to start an exercise program. I think it's great to want to start making better nutritional choices. All those things are absolutely good, and if you're starting to do that, certainly keep doing it. But if you think of this as a pyramid, the biggest part of that pyramid, the bottom, the broad base, should be shoring up sleep and stress management. Because if you don't do that, nutrition and exercise are going to fall short. It's going to be a lot harder to do those things, to make the proper choices, to be consistent with them. So I think it's really important to note that, this is not, while it's kind of a casual conversation we're having here, if there's one single thing you can do to truly make the biggest impact on your wellness right now, is to focus on making sure that your sleep is good.
Well, if you think about it, when you're lacking sleep or under a ton of stress, you are fooling with your hormones, and the hormones is what's running your body. So you got to get those hormones in the right rhythm in order for you to even you can work out as much as you want and starve yourself or whatever you want to do. But if your hormones aren't working properly, your body's not reacting properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's a lot of deep science with all this that we certainly won't bore everybody with, but
that'll be a room talk for us.
What's that?
I said we can talk about that behind the scenes. That's the stuff that excites you and I.
Yeah. So again, from a hormone, I mean, there's obviously other chemicals and hormones involved. Those are probably the 4 or 5 big ones to understand the effects, especially again if you're sleep deprived.
Yeah, and I want to touch base again on melatonin. I just want to make sure that everyone understood when you said that melatonin is released when it's dark. So those, that sleep with their blinds, if especially in the summertime when it's lighter out, dark or later, and, to pull the blinds and make sure your room is nice and dark. Don't fall asleep with the TV on, but we're going to be talking about that later. But you really need a room that does not have a lot of bright lights. They're even making light, what are they called? Night lights now that are more effective for people, because even something as small as a nightlight. Now, I work with a lot of Parkinson's patients and people with disabilities above and beyond that. So nightlights are inevitable because of getting up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. But I know even in our room, we sometimes even cover our alarm clock light just to make sure, because you have to have darkness for the melatonin to be released and to prepare your body for sleep properly. So, and also low levels of melatonin are related to increased cancer risk in breast, colon, and prostate cancer. So when we're talking about melatonin too, it's really important to get that adenosine and melatonin balance so that you're getting off to sleep properly to avoid other health issues, which is actually going to bring us right into the next topic of health problems linked to sleep deprivation. I wanted to talk a little bit about sleep deprivation because sometimes it's not about that night owl wanting to watch that extra Netflix episode, which I'm guilty of. Sometimes it's people that have sleep disorders. It can be like my husband right now, he's on night shift, so he's sleeping during the day. It can be caregivers lacking sleep. I know a lot of women that are caregiving of their husband or vice versa, or their children. Especially if you have an infant. So sleep deprivation does not always mean just staying up late. It can mean your medications. There's a whole lot of lifestyle ailments, and by no means is Jay and I ever saying that we know life happens. We know things happen. We know people have to work at these times of the hours. Or these times of the day, but having this information, you can make healthy choices, and that's the whole point of this broadcast every Friday night. And hopefully we can get it, because I'd love Jay to come on so we could talk together that way. But I feel like I want to educate as many people as I can so that they can make the best decisions for their self, in whatever lifestyle that they're living.
Yeah, I agree. And really what it comes down to, and kind of how I tend to view this whole wellness and fitness space that we work in, is that, there's a lot of information out there. You can't be alarmist about it. A lot of this stuff obviously has serious ramifications when we let things go over the periods of months and years. But I think the take home from any of this, whether you're trying to make nutritional changes, physical activity changes, or changes in your sleep, just, you understand what the outcome is. That's your goal. Figure out maybe the skills you need to work on, to get you to that goal, and then just come up with a plan to practice it. So basically what it is finding something that you can, the simplest little thing, little habit that you can work on, and once you have that, you go on to the next thing. So, we're going to sit here and we're going to talk about different tips and sleep hygiene and that kind of thing, and they're all good. But yeah, to try to do all of those at once is going to be overwhelming. So
yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah, baby steps for sure. One quick point I wanted to make, too, we were talking about adenosine, and then how caffeine can potentially affect sleep, is the receptors that adenosine bind to in the brain. Essentially what happens is when you have caffeine in your system, they compete for adenosine for those same receptors, and they usually are able to take those over. So that kind of gives you that period of wakefulness or that caffeine jolt that we're all very familiar with. But the problem is, once that caffeine wears off, you kind of have that crash because all that adenosine has built up, hasn't been able to bind to those receptors, and we experience that caffeine crash that a lot of us, again, are certainly familiar with. So the other thing too with caffeine is a couple other little things that I think are important to note here is, one, caffeine does have a half-life. So basically, I think it's 5 to 7 hours. So if you have a cup of coffee, say mid-afternoon or later in the day, say around dinner time, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, you still have about 50% of that caffeine in your system, which could cause wakefulness. The other thing to think about too, or to be aware of, where the enzymes in the liver that actually process caffeine, some people are very efficient at doing it, and those tend to be the people that can have caffeine later in the day and aren't seem to be bothered with their sleep. And then there's those of us like myself, if I do have caffeine too late in the day, it tends to cause erratic sleep and wakefulness in the wee hours. So just a couple of things I wanted to throw in there to explain why something like caffeine can be a potential detriment to your sleep.
Yeah, you know what? Those I've taken 2 of those DNA test kits, and they test you for how you metabolize caffeine. I am a fast caffeine metabolizer, and I can drink caffeine while going to bed. It's never affected me, but I have friends who, if they have it after lunch, they can't sleep for hours.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, so you really have to be careful, and just this is where my mindfulness comes in, and my mindfulness classes is you have to figure out yourself. You have to tune in and learn who you are. Notice when we're too busy up in our brains, we don't know. I have patients that I treat in physical therapy, and I'm like, well, when does it hurt? I don't know. Well, how describe the pain? Well, I'm not sure. And they can't pinpoint anything because they're too much into their future or into their past. They're not in that present moment, which is so important to recognize some of the habits that we are doing that we might not even realize we're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
So
health problems linked to sleep deprivation?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Yeah.
Well, we could probably spend hours just talking about that, but to kind of make it brief, and you kind of touched on a couple of these, but chronic sleep deprivation has been shown through the research to cause, pathological or disease states like cancer, Alzheimer's, other things like depression, anxiety, obesity, stroke, chronic pain, diabetes, heart attacks. Basically, the list goes
on and on and on. Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is how our immune system is impacted by lack of sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There is a huge impact on your immune system. I don't know, for those of you who have maybe went through a death in the family or something that's happened that has maybe brought some stress into your life, and you're lacking sleep, and maybe you're busy, maybe you're a new mom and you have the infant that has colic, and you notice you start to get sick more. You notice that things in your body aren't working properly. You tend to get that cold that you wouldn't typically get. Do you have any more on that, Jay, you wanted to touch on?
As far as immunity and sleep? Yeah, I think, again, trying to keep this easily digestible and not go off on one of my science geek type of tangents here, but I think the link between sleep deprivation and disruption in immunity and some of these disease states that we see are basically because it really interferes with, a lot of those immune chemicals that are produced while we sleep that help fight off infections and help us, fight against all these different things, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, all that type of thing. Actually, there's also a pretty interesting note in some of the research I came across is that in one study, participants were restricted to 4 hours of sleep for just one night. Just one night, they were restricted to 4 hours of sleep, and there was a 70% reduction in the natural killer cell activity, those are basically cytokines or chemicals produced while we're sleeping that, again, as I was mentioning, kind of help. They're a critical part of your immune arsenal. So, one night being underslept and you're seeing that kind of a reduction, you can just imagine what's happening with that kind of chronic sleep that you accumulate over months and years. And another interesting thing I came across too, and this was several years ago, is and I think it's related to this, certainly in part, is the World Health Organization has classified, working overnight shifts or third shifts as actually a carcinogen. There's a lot of probably reasons for that, but there's a lot of research that points to a lot of disruptions in immune function causing a lot of that. So, again, you don't want to be alarmist about these things or think allow it to increase your stress levels, because we're trying to actually help you reduce stress.
Right.
But I think it's really important to understand that how important sleep is, and a lot of us, with our busy jobs and our families, we don't think about it.
Absolutely.
We just keep going, and we say, I'll have all the time in the world to sleep someday. Well, chances are with that type of attitude, that day is going to come sooner rather than later. So I think a lot of these things are really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that book that you suggested earlier, you suggested it to me and I got it right afterwards. And it has a lot of studies in there that talk about people losing even just 1 and 2 hours of sleep of night, how significant the rate of disease is after that. It was mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah.
And I definitely, and we're going to talk about it a little later, just getting into a good routine. And again, like Jay said, we're not here to scare you. If you do work night shift and that's something that you're on and that's what's feeding your family, just recognize that it does cause some immune system problems. So maybe that's when you pick up some pieces by making sure you're eating a healthy diet, making sure you're doing other things to support what's lacking in the sleep department. So it's just finding that happy balance in your life that fits you as an individual. And that's one thing I love about the way Jay talks with his training and he has a very like mind of mine, is we work on the individual base. Everything we do is not cookie cutter. We work person to person. So we take your lifestyle into account, basically. So
absolutely.
Yeah, and if we get a lot of feedback that this is not working for people because Jay's not online, what I'm going to offer to do is Jay and I sometime in the next week will get together and we'll do a recorded Zoom call. And I will post the recorded Zoom call again next week. So anyone that missed out on any of this information, we will get a video together and we will repost it next week sometime or the following week. I shouldn't have said that without asking Jay first, but that way, you're getting the information.
I think I can fit you in, no problem, Beth.
I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you so much. So,
I'd be happy to do it.
So we will, so if anyone, just give us some feedback. If you're not hearing Jay or it's not understandable, let me know. And I post all of these videos on our Wellness 360 Fitness webpage and our YouTube channel. So afterwards, we will get this working. Facebook pulled the 2-person interviews after I knew that they pulled it, and then Zoom was working great, but for some reason Facebook wasn't accepting the Zoom tonight. So we will get together. We'll make sure that this is more understandable if this is not for you. So let's move on to, I wanted to talk a little bit really quickly about, it's not even just health problems that lack of sleep causes. It causes a lot of problems with brain function and executive function, making decisions, solving problems, your memory, emotional problems. I don't know about you, but I am one of those hangry people. If I am tired or hungry, I am really a disaster. So you really, getting enough sleep really can make a huge difference in coping mechanisms and your behavior. If you have children and you notice behavior changes, look at their sleeping patterns. Are they getting to bed on time? Are they sleeping enough? And just your learning and focusing, your slower reaction time. So when you're driving, if you're driving while you're tired, your reaction time is going to be much slower. So there are a lot of other things other than physical health problems. There's a lot of mental health problems that are go along with sleep deprivation. So let's get happy. Let's talk about some benefits, Jay. I'm going to start with some brain function. We just talked about the negativity of lack of sleep, but getting sleep is really great for building those neural pathways for your memory and for learning. Sleep is absolutely needed for proper brain function.
Yep, absolutely. Making you more alert, improving memory, improving your ability to handle your emotions. A lot of the studies on the REM cycle of sleep seem to point to being that as a big part of that. You were talking about depression and anxiety and loneliness, and that's a very real thing that is linked to being sleep deprived.
100%, yes. And sometimes they feed on, you get in that tornado where the depression is causing the lack of sleep and the lack of sleep is causing more depression. So that's where a lot of my mindfulness classes come in handy with people that have sleep problems, is how to stop that cycle. So just a little plug for my mindfulness class, but we talk about that a lot.
Yeah, and you see that all this stuff is really kind of intimately linked. We're talking about sleep tonight, but then how does that affect your physical activity and your nutritional choices and your anxiety and your stress and all these things? And when one piece of the puzzle is missing, it certainly has ramifications across a whole slew of things. So
especially when it's the big pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, like we were talking about, this is definitely one of those foundational things.
Yeah, definitely. I would put sleep and stress reduction is a very large, because again, if your hormones are out of control, you're not going to get the changes you want to get with your diet and exercise. So again, it's just a reminder that sleep balances that ghrelin and leptin, so the feeling of full and hunger. It helps balance your cortisol levels, so you're using cortisol properly. So not having sleep, actually, it leads to weight gain. So it's really important to know too, if you have a weight loss program in effect and you're exercising and you're eating right, if you're staying up late hours and only getting 3 and 4 hours of sleep, there's a good chance that's going to be a big roadblock in your weight loss journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you have to add to that before we move on?
No, I think we touched on certainly all the major things.
Awesome. All right, let's talk a little bit about sleep hygiene. I have one generalized one that I want to talk about, but and I'll let Jay kind of jump in here for this one. I want to talk a little bit specific to our Parkinson's people, so I'll do that after we talk a little bit about the generalized.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a number of different things you can do, and how I would take this would be, maybe just do a little bit, just think about what your current sleep routine is, whether you have one that's, more of a formal routine or it just kind of happens. And maybe just thinking about what one thing maybe you can try to help make that process better. So, we talk a lot about, circadian rhythms in the day, night, and darkness, but that's a huge one, is try to stay in more of a dark environment at night. And when you share a house with other people, it's tough. When you're the person that wants to go to bed early and start dimming lights early when others are still trying to do things, it can be tough. So again, you just do the best that you can, but, ideally, maybe start thinking about avoiding light or kind of dimming things down 3 to 4 hours prior to bed. Realistically, an hour is probably good. Other kind of obvious things that we talk about all the time too is avoiding blue light. So that's basically that light that we're getting from all of our screens and devices. You can get those blue light filters, and they certainly help, but my suggestion would be to try to cut the cord and lose the devices at least an hour before bed. Again, I know that's a tall order for most of us.
Yeah, but not only for blue light, for your mental clarity also. That's a huge thing in mindfulness, because you're not going to sleep if you're on the computer and you get stressed or upset or worried, or your mind is going a mile a minute. So for both reasons.
One thing that I've done is I don't even bring my phone upstairs anymore when it's time for bed. I put my wireless charger downstairs here, so I turn off my phone. Usually, I try at least an hour before bed. Put it on the charger, and then so by the time I get upstairs and get in bed, I don't have any of those distractions. Because again, you can check it one last time, and you see that email for work that you forgot to address, and then next thing you know, it causes you anxiety, and keeps you awake for the next few hours, or you sleep fitfully because you're thinking about things like that. So, again, obviously the reality is we have to live our lives. We have jobs. We have things that we rely on these things for. But we also need to address our health, and those are things we can certainly address the next day. An interesting study too. 1 hour of any device used before bed has been shown to blunt melatonin levels by about 20% and delay peak melatonin levels by about 3 hours. So what that basically is saying is, the longer into the night and closer to your bedtime that you're using devices, it can really delay the onset of feeling sleepy, getting drowsy, and actually falling to sleep. So, and it also resulted in less Rem sleep too. So remember, when we're talking about sleep, it's quantity as well as quality. 7 to 9 hours is what they say. Another way of looking at it is, if you remember, we were talking about the 4 stages of sleep and how they reoccur in 90-minute cycles. If you're getting about 5 complete sleep cycles per night, that puts you right in that 7 to 9 hour range. So 5+ cycles on a regular basis, you're probably going to be doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah. A couple other things too that I can relate to that might be helpful for people too is having a cool environment to sleep in. Recommended maybe 63 to 66 degrees Fahrenheit as far as what you set your room temperature at. I know for me, I get warm pretty quickly, so there's plenty of times, especially in the warmer weather, where I'll wake up just from being too hot. So I think it's important for quality sleep to have a nice cool environment. Another thing too is not staying in bed if you can't fall asleep. So if you're having a hard time falling asleep in your bedroom, maybe get up and go read a book in a dim light, and maybe do it in a different room. We want to kind of keep the bedrooms for just what they're designed for. So I think if you are having a problem falling asleep, maybe go to another dimly lit room, read a book. And the whole point of that is you don't want your brain to associate being awake in your bedroom. So
right.
To me, that can be kind of a powerful thing. I've been guilty of that too, where I've either watched TV to fall asleep or, read a book in my bedroom. So I try not to do any of that. That could also be a powerful tool. We've already talked about avoiding caffeine after midday for most of us. We talked about alcohol. And then basically, the other thing too is try to avoid anything to help you get to sleep. Treating the root cause rather than medicating. And I don't want to go into, sleeping pills and all those things, because that's beyond my scope.
Yeah.
But a lot of those things can actually be dangerous and not really helping. And again, they're not really getting to the root cause of why you're not sleeping. They're just kind of medicating you. So if you do have any issues whatsoever, certainly consult with your doctor, get tested, and see if you can, shore up the reason why you're not sleeping well.
Absolutely. And you touched on this a few minutes ago, and I want to just really pull it out for anyone that didn't catch it. Try one thing at a time. Because if you try, okay, well, I can't sleep, so I'm going to do everything Jay and Beth told me today. But if something's working, you're not going to know what it is that's working. So, try, my number one thing would be to start with the ritual. I think rituals are very, very powerful. So get your body used to, going to bed at a certain time, getting on a good sleep schedule, maybe reading a book, just get yourself in a nice schedule and see if that helps first. And definitely no TVs in the bedroom. Nothing that's going to really stimulate your brain or your thought process. And for goodness sake, I am a huge anti-news person. That is the last thing. You do not want to have a fight with your wife or husband. You do not want to have a fight with your kids, and you don't want to watch the news right before bed. You don't want to stimulate that brain right before you're trying to fall asleep.
Absolutely. And a good rule of thumb is the bedroom should be for two things, one of which is sleep. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's family appropriate. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. So, so no TVs in the bedroom. Keep the computers and phones out of the bedroom. I actually, as a massage therapist, treated a lot of people that had back pain from using their laptops in their beds. So just keep the computers out of the bedroom. I think that's safe for anyone to say. Just to reiterate for anyone that might not be able to hear Jay very well, just make a bedtime ritual, darken your room, to get that melatonin started. Make sure that you are turning off full spectrum lights. They suggest 2 hours. Jay and I are in agreement, I think, here that 1 hour is pretty more realistic than 2. Read a book, take a bath, use some white noise. My husband and I use white noise. We love it. You either love it or you don't, but it's something you can try. And I'm big on the meditation thing. I teach a lot of meditations, and deep breathing techniques when people can't fall asleep, how to turn into the breath and just focus on the breathing. And next thing you know, it's the next morning. So and mind the temperature.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about how much sleep people should be getting. So obviously, newborns, your baby's going to be sleeping most of the day, like your dog. And as they get older, it does get a little better. But if you have school-age children, really and truly, they should be getting at least 9 to 11 hours of sleep. Yeah. I have talked to parents that have kids that are 7 and 8 years old, and they let their kids stay up till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. There's too many health risks, and the percents are way too high. And with them being in school, the learning and brain functioning that's needed, they really should be getting 9 to 11 hours of sleep. Do you have any other suggestions for school-age kids?
Yeah, when they are sleeping half the day on Saturdays and Sundays, don't yell at them for being lazy. They need to sleep, so give them a break.
Yeah.
But I definitely agree that it's really important, probably right up through age 25 to get, minimum 9 hours of sleep, because that's when your brain is still developing. So I think another thing, too, is, when you look at adults, 7+ hours, 7 to 9 hours we talk about. A lot of people seem to think as we get older, our need for sleep decreases, which I don't think is correct. Our sleep becomes more fragmented. There's more reasons we get up. Maybe we have to empty our bladders more. We take medications. Right. So I don't think it's because, our need for sleep decreases as we age. I think we still need it. And we didn't really talk about it, and I think it's probably beyond the scope of our time here tonight, but, a lot of what we see with memory loss in conditions like Alzheimer's disease can be attributed to chronic sleep deprivation. So I think those are a couple of interesting points, but I think the numbers that you have there are certainly valid.
Yeah, according to the charts that I looked at, anywhere from the ages of 18 to 65 plus, they're recommending 9 to 10 hours of sleep. My husband makes fun of me. I'm a sleeper, so I'm like a 9 to 10 hour sleeper. He's more of the 6 to 7 hour sleeper. So, but you need it. You need it. If I don't get my 8 to 9 hours, I get sick. I get physically ill. So find out what's your magic number and go with it.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what it really comes down to with all this. Again, it bears repeating. It's really about self-experimentation. You know, we're all unique individuals. So, you know, what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. Find what works realistically in the life that you have, and just experiment. You know, I'm a big fan of doing that, whether it's nutrition, you know, exercise, or whatever. It's find what works for you to optimize your health.
Absolutely, 100%. And remember, again, we keep saying this, but it's one step at a time. Change one thing at a time, whatever that is for you. And eventually, as things start going more into the wellness area, you're going to start wanting to make better choices because you're better slept and your hormones are evening out. And when you feel better because you've slept, you're going to make better food choices. And then you're going to have the energy to exercise. And then when you exercise, you're going to be more tired. And you can flip that depressive tornado around, and you could start making one good choice that snowballs into a healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk just a real quick second about Parkinson's, because we have a lot of Parkinson's. If you don't know a lot about Wellness 360, we do run the Rocksteady boxing, and we do a lot of one-on-one with the Parkinson's. And Parkinson's, typically their average sleep is about 5 hours, and they are up twice as much as your typical average age adult. So they wake up a lot more when you have Parkinson's than the normal average adult. So I wanted to give just a couple things and tips for my Parkinson's friends here. There's insomnia, there's sleep fragmentations. They have nighttime, a real frequency of urination. They get a lot of vivid dreams and nightmares. And hallucinations, and some of that could be medication, some of it could be part of the disease. But anyway, I wanted to give just a couple things that I thought were really important. And this could be with anyone, 65 years or older, or anyone with a diagnosis that might have difficulties. But again, a lot of the same stuff that we talked about with normal adults, but making a bedtime routine. Make sure you're not drinking a lot before bed. So with, the last hour before bed, you're not wanting to put that big glass of water beside your bed and, guzzling it down. For Parkinson's especially, making sure you're exercising more in the early afternoon and the mornings, and you're not exercising in the evenings. Still getting lots of light. You want to get as much light as you can through the day, so that sunshine is really important. One thing that I thought was really cool is wearing silk pajamas, because if you have transfer problems, getting out of bed can really arouse you, trying to get up and move. Sometimes we have a lot, certain age population has a hard time getting out of bed. So by the time they've got out of bed, they're wide awake. So wearing silk pajamas is really a good way. It makes the transfers much easier to get up and out of bed. And again, like Jay said, if you lay there and you can't sleep within 15 minutes, get up. Get up, leave the room. Like Jay said, bedrooms are for two things and sleep is one of them. And go meditate, go read, listen to some music until you're starting to feel sleepy again. And one more thing, limit your naps to no more than 30 minutes through the day, and try to keep them in the mornings and early afternoons, and we're not napping in the later afternoons. So those are just some tips I have for some of my Parkinson's friends and some of my elderly yogis and friends that might be listening. Again, we'll do a real quick recap, but I just want to apologize one more time about our technical difficulties. I'm going to talk to Jay after this live, and if you'd like, we will record another one so that we can have a good recording to post on our pages. So everyone can see Jay's cleanly shaven face. If you know him, he had that big furry beard, which is now gone. So we want to make his debut there.
Yes.
So real quick recap. I'll let you go first, Jay. What do you want to say to our friends?
Well, again, I think we can't overstate the importance of sleep. I think, again, if you take anything away from this last hour or so, think about sleep. And along with that, I usually put stress management as the foundation of your wellness plan. So, again, I applaud you if you've made some steps to be more active. Incorporate more exercise, make better nutritional choices. Certainly continue doing that. But I think your efforts at really figuring out good sleep habits will help you with all those things, make them a lot easier, and you'll get a lot more out of those things. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if anybody that wants to take a deeper dive into this sleep, and Beth also mentioned the book Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams by Dr. Matthew Walker. I would recommend giving it a read. To me, it's one of those books that you can read cover to cover, or you can just pick and choose the sections that you want to read. And for someone who is such a brilliant scientist, he's written it in such a way that you don't really have to be a science person to understand it. If you like podcasts, I've listened to, he's been on several that I like to listen to. Found My Fitness with Dr. Rhonda Patrick is a good one. He was on there. Joe Rogan's podcast, he was on there. The Drive by Dr. Peter Attia. So if you like to consume your information via podcast, I would recommend those.
Yeah, I feel like I don't think normal people live the way Jay and I live. We listen to podcasts and read these books for fun all the time. I think I can speak for Jay when I say that if you see earbuds in my ears, I'm listening to one of these books. I love to learn. It's our job, and I know Jay is passionate about it. I'm passionate about it, and that's why I think we make such a great team when we bring this stuff. We want to educate. Our whole mission and our jobs is we want to educate you to make the best decisions that you can to be the healthiest you. And you can't do that if we're keeping all these secrets. So we keep educating, and things are constantly changing. You have to constantly keep up with the times. And again, it's just so that we do not cookie cutter your workout routines, cookie cutter your lifestyle management. We want you to be able to make the best choices for you. And guess who's the one that's going to know what the best choices for you are? It's you. So it's really important that you tune into yourself, you learn your own habits, you become aware. I had someone say to me, why do you think we need to be aware of ourselves? Why can't we just continue to do what we do? Awareness is the only way that you're going to be able to make any changes to make yourself a healthier person. So
and I think you get a lot more out of life when you live aware.
Absolutely.
Mindful.
Absolutely. So
by the way, I'm on a 91-day streak of my meditation. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
That's awesome. So Jay and I, like I said, when I'm going through to teach my Friday senior yoga class, we're always talking about these things, and we keep talking about getting together and doing some classes and things. And I think that we're still not 100% opposed to that one day, but I think that he's decided he was going to start to do meditation every day, and meditation is something that I teach. Meditation is something that I do every day. So I thought that was really cool. So I decided I was going to do yoga. And Jay, I just hit my 100 days of yoga nonstop the other day. So Jay's at 91 days of meditation. I'm at day probably 107 now of yoga, and I feel amazing. And I know you said you feel amazing.
Oh yeah.
So
maybe that's a fix for another talk. I know you would be a good lead for that.
Yeah, so I think what's going to happen here is Jay and I are going to talk, and we're going to talk about getting a better recording for you so that you can come back and rewatch this video. I post them again to our Wellness 360 fitness site. I know this is being live streamed to the Webster Parks and Rec, and I'm sure there's a lot of disappointed people. This was working flawlessly earlier today and working flawlessly on Wednesday. For some reason, the computer just wasn't uploading the live feed. So I am so thankful, though, Katie, giving a shout out to Katie for giving me the idea to use our phone. Would you say?
Katie Kovar, Parks
Kate,
and Rec.
yes, Katie Kovar, Parks and Rec. Big shout out to her. Without her, we would not be doing this at all right now. So I'm so thankful for Katie, and I'm so thankful for the whole Webster Rec staff. I tell you, that's where I put my son in for day camps, and I put my son in for all of their little extra things. The Webster Recreational Center is like no other. They have the most amazing staff. They have the most amazing programs, and I am absolutely so prideful to be a part of their team with the senior yoga classes and the meditation classes that I teach there. So thank you so much, Jay, for having me in life and having me on this Facebook Live.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And yes, I think we're going to do this again. So if you have anything you'd like to learn about, drop Jay a line, shout it out to the Webster Parks and Rec Facebook page, follow the Wellness 360 page, follow the Webster Parks and Rec Facebook page, and we will come together and we'll bring you lots more information to come. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you soon.